All right, welcome. Ross Nichols here with my good friend from Australia, Jono Vandor, and it has been a week. Tonight we're going to talk about a mysterious happening, a murder, possibly in Rotterdam. We're already in our next. We missed last week because I was off, but we're back. And this thing, not only are we going to talk about this mysterious death in Rotterdam, but we're going to talk about several mysteries in the Netherlands in 1883. What's he even doing in the Netherlands? So,
What is he doing there? And
yeah,
here's the word, Ross, the word that you use over and over again is mystery. It is absolutely a mystery. This period of time is not only the demise of Moses Shapira, which is just exceptionally sad. We're going to get into that. But what
yep,
was he doing there? And there are multiple reports as to the state that he
that's
was
right.
in,
That's right.
and what were his intentions, more to the point. And what is going on with the scroll in this period of time? There's a whole lot of mystery enshrouded around this, and as you mentioned, uh, was he murdered?
You look. Let
Did
me
he
let me
take
tell
his
you
own
this.
life?
You know what's mysterious about this above all for me is that no one that I'm aware of who ever studied or wrote about the Shapira saga, no one really ever even jumped into the question of what is he doing in the Netherlands, because I remember when I first became exposed to this story, that's what I wondered is what is he doing there? And I knew it was something. It had to be some reason.
It's funny, isn't it? There had to be some reason, and you were the first one, as far as I know. Like you mentioned, no one has documented this. No one really investigated it and looked into why he was there and what his intentions might have been. And you were the one that uncovered the most likely. In fact, it's not only is it plausible, but it's ridiculous to think that it isn't the case why he
Right.
was there. And we touched on that a little bit last week. Just remind us.
Well, one thing I want to say is it doesn't mean that I'm any smarter, certainly not, than any other investigator. I was just more
You took the
inquisitive.
time.
I just
Mm.
said, this is how I did it. I went to Google. Most of the viewers are probably real familiar with this. And I just simply typed in 1883 Netherlands. And
Hmm.
lo and behold, the first thing, and quite a few hits, the first several of the hits that came up said that in 1883, an international colonial and export exhibition was going on in the Netherlands, and this took place over a period of several months, and it was like a World's Fair. So big was this deal, Jono, that more than 1.5 million visitors, this is 1883, from
Quite the while.
outside the Netherlands went to the
Mm.
Netherlands during this time. So we're going to kind of unpack this. We're going to unpack the mystery of, maybe we can entertain. Maybe you have some ideas. Why didn't anybody ever check? I mean, was it just not important? What was, Jono? What was the what is the standard story? What happens to Shapira after he's ultimately rejected by all the scholars in Germany and at least publicly in Germany and England, and he goes to the Netherlands? What do they
Mm.
say about him? What do they say he's doing?
Yeah.
What did
What are
we
the reports?
uncover in the book, the Moses Scroll, that says that's not the correct picture at all? And then, as you said, we're going to wrap this up with a very intriguing question. The mystery of all mysteries, as far as the Venice of the North, is this: what happened on that fateful day in March of 1884? What is
Mm.
it that we suspect? Could it be that some really mischievous things are going on? We just don't know.
What direction do the reports lead us to? And this is it. Now, this isn't the only thing. Now, the Venice of the North is the chapter. I think it's chapter 11 within the Moses Scroll.
Chapter 12, yeah.
It's chapter 12
Yeah,
now,
yeah,
and
yeah.
this is not the only thing that is going on within this chapter. Within this chapter, Moses Shapira actually grants Monsieur Clermont Ganneau access, 3 days, I think, or at least three sessions of analysis
Yeah.
of the scroll, and he has some things to say that, and we should touch on that as well. But before we do, so last week we did talk about the fact that you uncovered that this World Fair was going on. It was going to be it was in Amsterdam, right?
That's right.
And and it's a big deal, and a lot of people are there. And my understanding is, and I think you touch on this in the book, is that the International Congress of Orientalists were to have they had scheduled a Congress the following year, but
That's
because
right.
of this World Fair, they had brought it forward to coincide because everyone's going to be there. Why make them go away and come back and all this sort of stuff? So it was just too convenient
That's right.
to put them together, and so it ended up that the International Congress of Orientalists convened in
Leiden.
where were they?
Leiden.
Leiden, that's
Leiden.
where
Yeah, that's right.
in September, in the middle of September. So um, just remind us again, the International Congress of Orientalists, within this features a heavy focus, if you like, or at least a particular focus on Semitic languages and the antiquity thereof. Is that fair?
That's very fair. And let me tell you, before I discovered that piece, the first discovery was is that there's this international expo that's going on there in the
Mm.
Netherlands, and I thought, well, maybe it's he's going to be there because there are so many people, and but that didn't quite make the connection for me. So I did some more research, and I was looking for something specifically to do with the Bible or religion.
Mm.
And I found that within this international colonial export expedition, there were some biblically religious related maybe displays. I mean, this is major, people from around the world. But I said, it doesn't quite satisfy the question of why he would be there. So my first thought was maybe he's just trying to unwind, Jonah. Maybe he's there just to kind of look at the greatest inventions of our time. And then it hit when I discovered that this International Congress of Orientalists was
Mm.
there. Now look, here's the thing. That International Congress of Orientalists only began in 1873. So this is only 10 years in, basically, or the 10th year since the first one in 1873. So then I thought, well, now wait a minute. This is only a few kilometers. We're talking about a short train ride and maybe a horse and buggy to Leiden, and one of the things that it said was that at this Leiden Congress of Orientalists, they had even planned, to your point, not only did they move it to coincide with the fair, the International Expo, they actually coordinated a visit where all these Orientalists would go to, because it's the biggest thing going on in the world, Jono. A lot of the
Mm.
greatest inventions of the time are being displayed there. So the next question, and this is where I think we're going to head, is that who was there? It's a who's who of Semitic studies, and I think that's where I think all of these mysteries are connected. The just so happens that in 1883, from the 1st of May, Jono, until October of 1883, the end of October, just those few months,
Mm.
1.5 million people are there. So this is the biggest thing going on in the world, and there Shapira finds himself. Now the question, we don't have a way of proving this, is did Shapira know ahead of time, like when he leaves in May of 1883 to go to Germany and then to England to show his scroll, did he perhaps, speculation, already have plans to go to this Oriental Congress and perhaps show off his wares? What do you think?
Surely he must, Ross, because what we do know is that he has brought with him a chest full of manuscripts and so on and so forth. He's brought with him other products to sell.
Yeah,
It makes only good business sense that he should be at a an event such as this because it pertains exactly to his field.
that's right.
So I cannot possibly fathom that he would not be attending.
Yeah, and I like
Now,
this.
I wanted
Yep.
to ask you a question about that,
Okay.
by
All
the way, and I'm
right. All
sorry to
right.
interrupt.
Now go ahead.
But I do know that the very was it the first one? Was the first one in Paris? Let me have a look. It
That's right.
kicked
It
off
was. Yeah.
in Paris in 1873,
Right.
and it was the next one, I think, in was it 1874 when they featured the Rosetta Stone? They had it on display,
Right.
and this took center stage. And I really, Ross, I think that not only did Shapira intend to attend the Congress, but I thought it's not unlikely that not only was he going to attend, but he would have been the man of center stage of the whole ordeal, because he would be there, like the Rosetta Stone being on display in 1874. He would have been there with his Moses scroll, and taking questions and talking to people about this and that. That it would have taken center stage because he was confident that it was going to be seen as an authentic scroll, so on and so forth. So you think that would have gone through his mind?
I think so. I think so. And not only that, I've talked to several of my friends who are in the academic world and attend the annual, what we have now, the Society of Biblical Literature conference, the SBL conference. People from all over the world attend this. And you know what happens in the downtime is that people discuss what's the latest, greatest, what's the big news. So for instance, in the time when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, what do scholars talk about? Well, they just talk about the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. What I can imagine going on in this time during this Semitic conference in 1883, even after everything that's going on, I can tell you that every scholar in the world knows about one thing that shook the academic world to the core, and that's this forgery, air quotes, of Shapira. So one thing before we jump into who was there, because this is an important part, I want to one more time quickly touch what is the standard view. The standard view is that Shapira went to Germany. His scroll was considered a forgery by the scholars in Germany. He packs up his scroll. This is the view of many people who don't really study deeply. He goes to London, where it is once again rejected. He writes a note saying, I don't know if I can survive this shame. He's been rejected. His scroll has been rejected. He goes to the Netherlands because of no known reason whatsoever. He wanders around the Netherlands and just becomes more and more depressed. He's insane. He's staying in shady hotels. He's a vagrant. Imagine that he's dirty. He's disheveled. His coat is probably buttoned up wrong. The holes aren't even aligned with the buttons. He's got like King
drooling.
David. Yeah, he's got spittle in his beard. Yeah, it's and ultimately
this is the picture that is painted.
That's right. And then ultimately he can't stand the shame. He throws his hands up in despair and ends his own life. That's the story as I received it. But something didn't feel right. Something felt incredibly wrong and untrue about that whole story, especially once I became convinced that this manuscript was authentic and ancient based on the preponderance of evidence. So let me just... Here's what I found. When I dug into this, I did a quick search to see who's there. Here are some names that our viewers who follow this series closely will know. Here are a couple of the names of the people who were there. You ever hear of a guy named Professor Schlotzmann? Schlotzmann is from our story. We know Schlotzmann, the German. We know Dr. Carlos Landberg. Now, Landberg is the guy that Goethe mentions in his book, where he says that Shapira showed the leather strips to a German scholar who happened to be in Jerusalem at the time. And Goethe says, it happened because I talked to Landberg. Landberg told me that he verified the story to his face. Then we have Professor Sayce. Remember Archibald Sayce? Yeah, go ahead.
Archibald Sayce, right. Yep. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify something that you just said. Are you referencing
Schroeder?
I'm trying to thank you.
Yep.
Schroeder.
Yep.
Right. Now remind me, Schroeder is the paleo expert. He's a diplomat based in Syria. He is to be reported by Shapira as authenticating the document.
That's right.
And then later backtrack. So we may revisit just what you said there. We may go into a little bit further detail just a little bit later.
We will. Yeah. So not only is Dr. Schroeder a known Semitic expert, but he, in the letter that Shapira wrote May the 9th, 1883, he wrote the letter to Hermann Strock, Professor Strock. He said, hey, here's this, I'm going to introduce you to this ancient manuscript, so forth and so on. And he says at the very end, sort of right as he says a P.S., by the way, Dr.
Mm.
Schroeder, who happens to be, and everyone in the world knows Dr. Schroeder. It'd be like today somebody says, and Dr. Bart Ehrman, or, something like that. Yeah, everybody
Sure.
knows.
Yeah.
And so this guy, we're going to talk later about him kind of crawfishing, but also I read the pamphlet and the book about this Semitic conference, and as well as the articles in the newspaper, which were being published in the Athenaeum, the London Times, and so forth, kind of word back from the academic conference there in Leiden. And one of the things that really struck me is everyone who is involved in the Shapira affair is at the conference. So you telling me I don't think Shapira would be there? He's in the Netherlands, of all places on the planet. That's where he's at. So one thing that really hit me is that Dr. Ginsburg, I'm just going to look in my book. It says Dr. Ginsburg is listed as a member, and Professor Schrader, not Schroeder, but Schrader, who viewed Shapira's manuscript in the home of Lepsius, was the president of the Semitic section of the Congress. So of all the people who are there, again, we have Sayce and Schlottmann and Ginsburg, and we also know that another guy was there. At first, I thought he just submitted an article and maybe had it read, but we also know that a Monsieur Charles Clermont-Ganneau, who is every bit the enemy of all things Shapira, happens to be there.
And you would be, and if I was Shapira, I'd be avoiding him like the plague. And it would have thrown a wet blanket over the experience for him being able to move freely, I think, and conduct business or to be able to speak to people and so on and so forth. Because if it were me, I would feel like that Ganneau, if he knew that Shapira was there, he would set his sights on him, so to speak. But what I want to know from you is just to remind me of the sequence of dates, because as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, I'm guessing that before Ganneau came over for this conference, for this Congress, to present his views on this and that he had the opportunity to view the Moses Scroll.
Not quite.
It's after?
It's after. Yep, it's after.
Go ahead.
Now, so let's give you, that's a great lead in though, Jonah, because here's what happens. Again, there's the story that's commonly told from those who don't study and don't read and don't care about details. And then there's the story you find out if you simply look and read. So Shapira goes to Amsterdam first. There are 3 places in the Netherlands that we have to know in this section, in this segment, this episode. Number 1 is Amsterdam. That's where this international expo is going on. It happens to be where Shapira goes first. Remember, Ginsburg's letter, his note to Ginsburg that says, I can't survive this shame, is dated the 23rd. All right. So by the 28th of August, Shapira is in a hotel in Amsterdam, and he's writing a letter explaining how everything that has been wrongly said about his manuscript doesn't hold weight. He writes a 12-page letter to Bond and says, look, please get some scholars that aren't biased. So he's already there. He's set up shop. He's working, and he's certainly not. We don't get the image that we described earlier that so many people have. He's staying in a nice hotel. By the way, you will probably not find in other books what I described. You'll see that he was in shady hotels. Why? Because the image is Shapira's at the end of his he's just thrown his hands up. He's just living in these run-down, dark, dingy hotels. But let me tell you, the Netherlands were totally on the remake because they're preparing for the world to be there to see the International Expo. So he's staying in a nice hotel. Now, something happens. We know that he begins in Amsterdam and around October. So he gets there the end of August. So let's just say September to October, almost the end of October. We know that he moved. We know that he went from the Amsterdam to Blumenthal. Now, why did he leave Amsterdam? It's not because he's crazy. Here's why he did it. because what we now know is that this international expo ended. Well, was he going to stay there? He's been there for the
Right.
duration. He simply leaves and he goes to the next place. Now, what we also know is that about this time, about the end of his stay in Amsterdam, there is an exchange that we have a record of, and I noted in the book, where he's selling documents that are in his possession with a Dr. Rieu, Rieu, who is at the British Museum. So again, the image that people have in their mind is that he's shamed, he's discredited. The British Museum thinks he's a forger. They're still buying documents from him, for God's sake. They haven't given up on him. He's still a valuable part of the team. He is an agent for the British Museum. So he goes to Bloomingthal. He's only there for a little bit of time, but he's still dealing. We don't have any yet. We've not yet found any real evidence for what he's doing other than to know that it's not what other people say. He's on his feet. He's making money. He's not staying in rundown, shabby hotels as these other authors would have you believe. Now, what we need to tell people again is we know that 15 leather strips are still at the British Museum. And so we know that in the beginning of our story, there were 16 leather strips. Now, what that means, and I proved this in the research, it makes sense to me, and it works out on paper, that one strip, one of the 16, leaves 15 in the British Museum, and one with 2 columns, I believe he has with him, as the story will prove later. He probably is showing this to scholars in the Netherlands. Isn't that what we think?
Sure.
I mean, you and I have had some really good conversations about this. It only makes sense that this is what's going on. Now, if we can fast forward to January, because this is a real important part of the story, the French government basically sends Clermont-Ganneau from France back to Jerusalem with a special mission. And the special mission is, among other things, to look at this scroll. Remember, the affair is closed. Basically because of Clermont-Ganneau and Ginsburg, who said it's a forgery. The world's all said it's a forgery. Now he's back in Jerusalem.
Right. Okay. So thank you for that. Now, the reason why I ask the question is because we're to understand that he is at the Clermont-Ganneau is at the World Fair. He's at the Congress of Orientalists, and he would be most certainly parroting that which were his objections, having, spent a couple of hours in a dimly lit room, having looked at a couple of pieces of the scroll. He would be parroting those objections and saying this is why it's a forgery, and aren't I so great? Now, so I have 2 questions now.
All right.
First of all, why does he want to see it again? It's done. It's dusted. It's over. Shapira's reputation is destroyed, and the scroll is discredited. Why does he want to take the opportunity to see it again? Number one. Number two, are his objections the same as his objections that he fed to the Athenaeum? Go ahead.
Excellent question. Look, here's the deal. I think, and you can only get to know someone in history through what we read, the reports of the person themselves and the report of others. And in both cases, I see Clermont-Ganneau as brilliant, but arrogant and very difficult to get along with. So he published, and I think he really believed, Clermont-Ganneau, because he has this blinding, almost just a passion against Shapira, it would seem. And some, even today, who love Clermont-Ganneau, who think he's the greatest and he's this excellent, debunker of all these things that are fake and forged, they think he's great for this. But here's what I think. I believe that he shot it down, and I think he really believed, because there's no precedent for this ancient scroll with a clean edge and a jagged bottom. He thinks that he's busted Shapira as one who cut from the bottom of an existing roll the raw materials by which he produced this fake. And so he now wants to prove it. But remember, when he went before, as you pointed out, he was not allowed to touch, to handle, to really prove his own theory. He's convinced of it. The guy is arrogant as hell. He just wants to really prove it. So he goes to the library. He talks to Ryu, who is over the manuscripts department, and he says, "Hey, can I please look at this now?" And we know this because of a work that he published. He tells the story. And what he's told is, look, the last time we asked, could you, Claremont Ganneau, have a look-see at this document, the owner said no. But have no fear, I'll get in touch with him and I'll ask him. Now, does that sound like a good idea if you think that the owner, i.e., Moses Wilhelm Shapira, is wandering around drunk and stupid in the Netherlands? Or is it somebody with, where he's at? He can write the letter. He can say to the person, to the headquarters here at Blumenthal, the hotel, whatever. And that's exactly what he does. So he writes Shapira and he says, hey, can Claremont Ganneau take a look at your document? And you know what? Shapira says yes. Now, I want to know from you, why do you think Shapira would say yes to this jerk, Claremont Ganneau?
Well, that's right. Well, I think because the damage to the reputation has already occurred, I don't think that he feels like he's going to do any more damage. In fact, if anything, he may feel, should he have the time now to take a closer look, perhaps it's not. So, I mean, is he going to be able to do any more damage? No, I think Shapira is thinking he's not going to be able to do any more damage. If anything, he's going to look at it and go, you know what, maybe it is authentic. There's a very, very small, slim chance of that happening. And he thinks, well, why would I deny it? Now, and again, the other thing is, if he denies him twice and doesn't grant him the access and liberties that Ginsburg had to deal with the scroll, then we know that Ganneau is going to go and whine to the papers and do all of this. So I think it's in Shapira's best interest to let him have a look.
What can he lose?
What can he lose?
Yeah. And I think you're right. That's the way I took it when I was just up to my eyeballs in the research. Now, just for a second, put this on the shelf, because we're going to talk about Claremont Ganneau's inspection, because the stuff is still piling on. In other words, it's not enough that Shapira's manuscript has been rejected and everybody in the world knows it, both at home and so forth. Now, meanwhile, by the way, his family has not heard from him. At least that's the report from Miriam Harry. Last they heard, this thing is about to sell. So that leads people to kind of put a check mark by the view that he's wandering around in a drunken stupor and worried, and at the basically he's given up on life and everything, and he's in the Netherlands. But that's not what's going on. But let me tell you what is going on. This Dr. Schroeder, who Shapira said, hey, I think this is authentic. Shapira says, I just met with the guy. He saw it in the home of one of the Bergheims, and here's this Phoenician expert who looks at it and says, this is unbelievable. Where'd you tell me the story? I think it's authentic. So we have these reports that and the report is not just from somebody like me who wrote a book saying that this is authentic. Hermann Goethe, who we think caved to the academic pressure of his day, wrote in his introduction to Fragments of a Leather Manuscript that he heard from someone who talked to Schroeder that Schroeder believed it was real. But listen to this, Jono. Now, watch what Goethe does. Schroeder is really worried because now everybody in the world has dismissed this as a forgery, and he knows that in print, Goethe has said that Schroeder believes it's real. So Schroeder gets a hold of Goethe, and he's like, hey, I need a correction to go to the papers. Now, I don't know if you remember this in the book, but listen to this.
I do.
So Goethe writes this to put this on the wire, get it out there. And he says the following: I take this opportunity, this is Goethe, to tell you that Consul Dr. Schroeder wrote to me to correct Shapira's statement. I, Schroeder, was granted only a fleeting glimpse of a leather strip by the lamp light on the evening of May the 18th in the house of Mr. S. Bergheim in Jerusalem. I doubted its authenticity to great extent, but I couldn't justify it for the time being, since neither the inspection of the entire manuscript nor precise examination of the contents of it was allowed to me. When Mr. Shapira asked me whether I thought his manuscript was genuine, I answered that I could neither answer this question in the affirmative nor in the negative without a longer study of the entire manuscript, but that I could not derive any proof of forgery from the character of the writing alone, i.e., from the outer appearance of the characters. Although not asked to do so, this is Gutta, I consider it necessary to bring the above to the public's knowledge and thereby correct Shapira's statements. So here's Gutta. In some ways, I love Gutta. In other ways, I think Gutta, grow a backbone, son. He here says, no one asked me to say this, but I feel compelled to. Yeah, somebody asked you. I'll tell you who asked you. His name is Schroeder. And you caved once again, my brother. So he does put this out in the paper. So everybody wants to distance themselves from authenticity. And by the way, we know from Miriam Harry's book, Little Daughter of Jerusalem, Miriam Harry, again, is Shapira's daughter. She writes her recollections of this time. She says that her mom was really upset because the character we believe is Dr. Schroeder's son, who is engaged to Augusta, Miriam's older sister, Shapira's oldest daughter, that he's called everything on the wedding off. They were going to get married, but he says there's no way that we can tie in with this Shapira name with all this bad stuff going on. So he distances himself.
Wasn't it also Miriam Harry who speculated that Schroeder changed his tune in order to protect his reputation? Do I recall that correctly?
You mean that Schroeder did? I'm sorry, I missed just one sec. Yeah.
But Miriam Harry.
That's right.
That was his motivation.
Yeah.
And it would seem that really, as you pointed out in the past, that so many of them who sided in favor of forgery were doing exactly the same. In fact, many of them, you pointed out, within that year of doing so, gained their professorship or some such promotion.
Oh, it's promotions for everybody. It's like in the States, we used to have, she's still alive and well, I guess, but the Oprah Winfrey show. Everybody gets a new whatever, and it's gifts for everyone. Yes, you're now a full-time professor. You get a professorship. Hey,
you get a professorship.
In fact, anyone who denounces any connection with the authenticity of Shapira's scroll is going to get a parting gift today, because we've never seen anything like this. So, okay.
Yeah.
Now, go back to the British Museum with me. Come, Jono. We're going to the British Museum, and here comes Claremont Ganneau. Claremont Ganneau asks Ryu and Bond, and they say, well, let's get a hold of Shapira. Shapira says, yeah, why not? But, he said, you can let him look at it and do all the tests he wants, but I want somebody in the room with him. And to watch. Keep an eye on him. Keep an eye on the boy. You know, he's anyway. So, and we have that letter, by the way. I read the letter. It is amazing, this back and forth. So this I cover in the book. And remember, Ganneau had said August the 15th, he said, I propose that a very simple test would put this thing to bed. If anyone can take a good look, because I can't, I'm not allowed. Now, God only knows why I'm not allowed, because I'm the guy who calls out forgeries, but be that as it may, if someone can look, take a good look at the top edge that he believed was cut from the bottom of the scroll. He said, I believe that if you take a good look, Jono, what you're going to find is traces of letters which extend below the length of a normal letter. In other words, it's like, because the theory is that Shapira cut the bottom of an existing scroll. Now, if you look at a Torah scroll, if you're going to maximize that, remember the scroll itself, the Shapira fragments, 16 in number, basically representing 2 manuscripts. The width went from 3.5 inches to 4 inches. I mean, we're not talking about very much. So he's saying that in the attempt to get as much raw material as he can to fake this scroll, whoever the forger is, probably Shapira, he's going to probably mess up and cut the dangling part of one of these paleo letters or an existing from a Hebrew scroll, so it wouldn't be paleo, see. So he says that's one of the things. He said, I also want you to check the thread. I want you to check. He gives them 4 basic things, and I'd have to look to get exactly which 4. What I found striking is that just a few months, that was in August, now we're in January, he has a chance to do the very test that he's just said is a simple, do this test and you're going to find what I found, guaranteed, because I am the great and the mighty and the awesome, forgiving the iniquity of, anyway. He says you're gonna find what I found, and then he has a chance, Jonah, and he doesn't do those things. In fact, while he still calls it a forgery, because you can bet one thing, he's not going to go back now and say it's authentic. So he says it's fake, and then he starts telling why it's fake, and he comes up with different reasons. Number one, the leather strips, he now becomes convinced, though he doesn't say, remember when I said this, now I say, he's saying it's like it's not a consistent leather, so it's not like from one manuscript, like I think it's fascinating that he doesn't find what he had thought he did. Okay, so here's what he said. He commented on an indefinable smell of rancid oil. Now, by the way, this is what those who dealt with the scroll at the time, they described it variously, Jono, as asphaltum. It's got sort of an asphalt smell to it. Guess what? When they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, you know what everybody says? It's got the smell of asphalt. When the Bedouin opened the jar, 1946-47, they said, it's this blackish, greenish, oblong lump that smells of asphalt. And that's exactly what they smell here. He says that he noted traces of stitching, and in one instance, a small knot in the thread. We see this in the Dead Sea Scrolls too. He maintained that the forger had cut the leather strips, but seemed to backtrack slightly from his view that they were made from intact rolls. Now he says, look, this is like from, various pieces of scroll. The bottom line is that he just didn't do what he said he was going to do. Here's what I wrote in the book. 4 easy tests is what he said anybody could do to prove it. Yeah. And yet 5 months later, when he was permitted to examine the fragments, he seemingly forgot his own advice. If the experiments he had enumerated were such an easy way to prove the fragments of forgery, Clermont-Ganneau missed an excellent opportunity to do so during those 3 good sessions in Dr. Rieu's office. So there we have it. So I don't think that Clermont-Ganneau became convinced that he was wrong and that these were actually authentic ancient documents, because, again, I don't think any scholar could have made that determination with any certainty, because this is 60 years before the discovery of the Dead Sea Scroll, 80 years before the, when they were found, 80 years before the discovery.
When they were found, in 65, that's right.
Yeah. So now we're in the winter moving into spring, and about a fortnight before the end of Shapira's life, it says that he moved into, now he's already in Rotterdam, and he goes into a guest house, and he checks into the guest house. Again, this is the last place that Shapira will stay. And it's where he's ultimately going to be found deceased in his room.
Now this is a dingy little guest house in a seedy part of town. This shady little drug-riddled alcoholic
red light district. Don't forget the red light district. It's really bad. Yeah. It's the worst of the worst. It's a dump. It's a dive. It's horrible. So this is the way it's described. Well, I just happened, this computer is an amazing thing, and I just happened to find that this guest house had its open house, its inaugural welcome to the brand new guest house of, it just happened to have just opened not long before Shapira checks in. Now, I imagine a very proud, upset, distraught maybe, but a very proud and capable scholar of the Hebrew Bible who's attended and maybe even made connections. We're going to speculate on that maybe in another show, but he's made connections. This is your idea, and I really like it, with some of the scholars who were attending that Oriental Congress, and he's checked in at Rotterdam. And I
Right.
think he's nicely dressed, and I think people notice this guy looks like he's got money. Of course, everybody in
Into
the
a new
19th
hotel.
century. Yeah.
Because the question has to be asked, well, why did he go from? I mean, obviously, the timing of why he left Amsterdam, you highlight because the Congress of Orientalists is finished, the fair is finished. He's moving on from that appointment. But why did he go to Rotterdam, and why is he staying there in Rotterdam? And that is a really interesting question that we can talk about a little bit later. But what I'm interested before we get there
Yep.
is, okay, so he's moved into this new hotel. He's working there. We're
Nice.
going to talk
New
about that.
nice hotel. Nice. Yeah.
Nice new
Yeah.
hotel. He has he's taking correspondence from various people and writing back to them, and he's allowed Gano to have a closer look because what can he lose?
Yep.
But not only that, Ross, but he is doing business. And what I want to do is ask you, what is the business that he's doing, and what other documents is he trading? What does he have with him, and who is buying? What's going on there? What do we know about that?
He's selling good cut. He's selling what he sells. He's selling scrolls. He's selling manuscripts that he had with him. And he's basically, when he writes Ryu and Ryu responds, we have a catalog of that correspondence. He basically says, hey, look, are you going to buy this or not? I happen to have with me, let's see, I have in this chapter somewhere. Let's see. Here's a few things that he has with him. He has a Yemenite prayer book, a 15th century commentary on the book of Exodus, a 14th century medical text, complete with a botanical lexicon, and the book of Genesis with Arabic translation. He's got several things. Those are some of the works that he's selling. In fact, here is an entry from a manuscript at the British Museum. Here's what it says. This is dated 15 October 1883 by Dr. Charles Rioux at the British Museum. It says, Dr. Rioux has the honor of reporting to the trustees that the following 4 Hebrew manuscripts have been offered by Mr. Shapira for £25. Now, my research says that at the time, this is roughly $3,000. So he's got $3,000 to sell. And by the way, Rioux said, I highly recommend that we buy this. This is a good deal, and it would benefit the museum. And indeed, they did. They bought it. So again, the idea that Shapira is broke, staying in the
And
shady.
entirely discredited.
Jono,
Yeah.
I don't have $3,000, and this is 2024. And again, think about that. If I, I mean, he's doing just fine. He's still mad because the scholars just don't. They don't know enough to approve of his manuscript. And it's understandable, but he's frustrated with this. He's still making deals. So we have another deal. That was October. We know that he made another deal. I think it's January. I'd have to verify that. But he's still
He's
doing
doing business is the
Yeah,
point.
that's right.
And not only is he doing business, Ross, but people are doing business with him, despite the negative press and the fallout of the scroll, and a decade earlier the Moabitica affair, and so on and so forth. People are still doing business with him, and understanding that other products that he has to sell are genuine products. They're having no problem with that.
Yep.
It seems to me like Ross, it just seems to me that the primary objection underlying all of the objection as far as the Moses Scroll is concerned is that it doesn't agree with the text,
Yep.
or that it perhaps threatens the institution. And if I were Shapira, I would be And he is, by the way, he's writing to these guys saying, please, while you've got it, let some other than Gounod, other reputable scholars with some backbone, some who are not there to protect the institutions, some who are not there to agree with the canonical text,
Yeah.
who are willing to take a chance, who are willing to stand up and entertain the
Potential.
scholarly criticism,
Yeah.
the documentary hypothesis, this, that, and the other. And he can't get that. He can't get it from Germany, and he can't get it from England. And they are the two places. Now, what would be the third place, Ross? If you what other country in the world has such an invested interest in biblical, where?
America, man. America.
America.
Yeah.
America. And this really got me thinking, because I got thinking to myself, why is he staying in Rotterdam for so long?
Yeah.
Why is he there?
Yep.
Why
you came up with this, and this, I think, is, we're investigating it because it's such a good idea. Tell us, what are you thinking?
Well, really, really briefly, because this is highly speculative, to be fair.
Oh,
this
yeah.
is highly speculative. But if I was to put myself in Shapira's shoes, and he seems like he's still barracking for the authenticity of this document and for someone with some gumption to really harness that and come on board, I would be thinking, okay, England, you had your chance. Germany, you had your chance. And being at the Congress of Orientalists, I don't doubt that someone may have gotten to his ear and said, hey, listen, there are people in the States in this field that would agree with
Sure.
the Elwes document, the priestly documents, the Arwes, this, that, and the other, and different authors, and what you have here, and that the claim that you're making is legitimate. They would be willing to entertain it, so much so that there are perhaps people, Ross, that aren't that are willing to put their reputation on the line and stand against the institutions to stand up for what is true.
Yep.
One such individual, Ross, that in history in America, in New York, by the way, would be Charles Augustus Briggs.
Okay.
And we use the Brown Driver Briggs.
Absolutely.
Multiple times a week. Everybody does when you're dealing in topics that we're dealing in. And
so let me ask you. Let me ask you, because we want to get into this theory, because we're gonna do a show on potential possible theories. So let me ask you this though: if let's say you were Shapira in 1883, and you happen to be in the Netherlands, and let's say you just happen to meet with some of the top scholars in the world. Let's say they happen to be in the Netherlands at the same time. You happen to run into them, and they said what you just said. Hey, Shapira, there could be people in America, and you wanted to travel to America. Jono, where would you go in the Netherlands?
You would take the SS Rotterdam from Rotterdam, obviously. And it goes to New York.
Is there really such a vessel at the time? Was there?
There was such a vessel at that time, and it was a 15-day journey, and it just went. That was its gig. It just went back and forth. So it would make sense to me that someone might have said to him, "Hey, there's this Francis Brown is in the States, and Charles Briggs is in the States, and that Charles Briggs guy is a bit of a hardhead. He really ruffles some feathers in his institutions because they don't agree with him, but he
holds his own.
Care.
Yeah, he toes the line.
He holds his own. And this is one of the things I love about Briggs, is that he doesn't care, and he holds his own, and he tells it like it is.
I like people like that.
So much so, Ross, by the way, that in 1892, less than a decade later, he was tried for heresy within his Presbyterian institution.
I like this guy.
Eventually resulting in him being defrocked, right? Whatever that is, being defrocked and excommunicated from the Presbyterian Church in 1893. So one of the accusations against him was that he didn't believe in the authenticity or Mosaic authorship of the 5 books. Not to say that he didn't think that Moses didn't write some of it, but he did not believe that Moses wrote all of it.
Like about his own death and things like that.
Absolutely, things like that. So I would like to think, and again, highly speculative, but I would like to think that someone got into his ear and said, listen, someone like, there's this guy, great scholar, Charles Briggs. You should might be very interested in having a look at your document. And maybe if you get over to the States, or you get out at New York, where he happens to be,
Yep.
and you take now. What happened though, Ross? Let's say that that's true.
Okay.
If we imagine that that's true, and that was Shapira's intention, he was, doing some business there in Rotterdam, and he's waiting for an opportunity to board a ship and go over there. Well, at the time that he was there, in fact, just before he arrived, I think, in Rotterdam,
In February of
the
1884. Yep. Go ahead.
SS Rotterdam ran ashore, and on return from, now I'm not being
Conspiratorial.
this is
Yeah.
not part of it. I think this is just what happened,
Yeah.
And it was returning from New York, I do believe, and it ran ashore on its. This is apparently it's on the 26th of September. It ran ashore on its 65th voyage from New York to Rotterdam, and I don't think that I
Another
don't think
ship,
that
yeah.
there were another ship was available until it must have been, I think, April of 84,
Okay.
I think. And so
Now, let me stop.
which
Let
is
me stop you
quite a long
because
time. So
yeah, we want to get into this. This is a big theory, and I think, in fact, you and I have already begun looking at Manifest and various ideas on this, because the thing with historical research is you have to dig, and you really have to consider all these great options. I think you're onto something. I think we at least have to explore the possibility. Now let me, because we
I like the thought of it.
yeah, we talk about the mysterious death of Shapira, and we are coming to the close of our time this week. Now, what we want to do is hit that, because we are true to our word. We're going to talk about this, but we're going to talk more about it with our group after this session is over with the Yakad. But here's what we know. Can I move into this, because
Go ahead.
it's very so the 9th
Because we have
of
to, yeah.
at the close of the first week of March, the 7th of March to be exact, people at L.C. Wicker's hotel, the Hotel Williamsburg,
Brand new hotel.
brand new guest house there, they noticed that guest Shapira hadn't been seen. In other words, Friday evening, Shapira goes to, they all see him evidently, because there's mention of this in the reports. He leaves, he goes to his room, and they don't see him. They don't see him.
Shalom, Mr. Shapira.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, see you later, my friend. Nice to see you. So he goes to his room. They don't see him Saturday, and so there's some concern. So on the 9th of March, on Sunday, the guests go up to the table there, and they're at the counter, and they're like, "Hey, you seen Mr. Shapira?
Has he ordered any
you
room
know,
service? Has
no,
he come down for lunch?
I
Is there
hadn't
anything
seen
like
him.
this? Like,
I hadn't seen him. So they go. The
still-
manager goes
okay.
to the room, and jiggle can't get the door's locked, obviously, from the inside. Can't get in. I don't know. Maybe they didn't have a master key. Whatever. Bottom line is, they call the police. So here's what I wrote. After it was discovered, this is the police log, by the way, from Rotterdam, from the police. It's been translated and approved by a Dutch-speaking person, I might add. After it was discovered at the office in the guest house of L.C. Wickers, we would say, at Boomtjes in the Hotel Williamsburg, that a lodge guest did not come out of his room the day before yesterday, and the door was still closed, Inspector Police Officer Gerald Putman Kramer went in to look. It was found that a guest named Shapira, bookseller, book dealer, and agent of the British Museum, robbed himself of his life by gunshot. The corpse was looked at by a medical person before it was brought to the storage known as drinkling. Now, drinkling, the phrase in Dutch, refers to a place where, let's say, because there's a lot of water, people can look at the map. If you have never looked at Amsterdam, the Netherlands, Rotterdam, you'll see it's waterways everywhere in the water there. If someone drowns, they don't know who they are, Jono. They bring them to the drinkling house, which means drowning, a place of drowning. So here's Shapira. At least the initial police report that we have says we think he robbed himself of his life by gunshot. Now, and we're going to talk more about this later with the other group, but I'll say this. Here's what I found interesting. I started looking for every report. By the way, reports of this spread fairly quickly, considering the 1884 timeframe we're dealing with, and it was on the wire. So London heard about it, Germany heard about it. In the States, I found reports in the New York Times about Dr. Shapira's death, or Mr. Shapira's death. Here's what I wrote. The reports offered different and sometimes with conflicting details, likely due to unconfirmed accounts provided by unnamed interviewees. The basic story was consistent, however. While in the Netherlands, over approximately 6 months, Shapira had moved several times, beginning in Amsterdam, then Blumenthal, and finally Rotterdam. He had only been at the Hotel Willemsburg for a fortnight. Several accounts described the scene inside the room. Papers started embellishing, maybe, or started, what'd you know about his room? Could you tell me something about his room? Because it's a big deal. This is in the news every day. The consistent points were that there was a trunk or a case inside the room that contained Hebrew and English manuscripts, brochures, letters, some business cards bearing the addresses of booksellers and antiquarian agents in London and Jerusalem. But here's something that really struck me, is that the details did come out differently in some of the stories. For instance, in some reports, it said that he was found deceased on his bed in a pool of blood or on the ground, on the floor. Now, some people might say, well, that's okay. Well, what's the big deal? Sometimes it said a revolver. Sometimes it said a pistol. Sometimes it said a rifle. Sometimes it said a gun. There is one report, Jono, that we have read in another language. We're currently getting confirmation on our translation, but it records 2 holes in the head. Now, I'm not an expert, but it would be very difficult for someone to shoot themselves twice. Maybe
shoot themselves twice.
The question is, does the article I'm referring to indicate an entry wound, exit wound? Maybe that's what it means. I don't know. I'm not an expert in that language. We're looking into this. But there are some things which make me wonder. I could totally understand, honestly, that he has reached the end, Jonah. He tried everything to convince the world of the authenticity, and maybe the weight of it is just too... So I can get that, but at the same token, I think there are people who either could have just been trying to rob him. Maybe he's a well-dressed guest. They think maybe he's got money. Or someone who wants him silenced.
Well, there are questions, Ross. There's obvious questions because there are conflicting reports, as you point out. Was a gun found? We don't know if there was, because it doesn't specify what kind of gun. And the other thing, Ross, is that how can it be in a hotel that shots can be fired if unmuzzled shots are fired and no one hears that? It's not until a couple of days later that they say, "Hey, Shapira, hey, has anyone go and knock on his door? We're going," nothing is heard at the time. Why is that? I wonder why that is. There's a whole lot of things about this that's very suspicious. By the way, do we know that that chest with contents with scrolls and so on and so forth? Where did that material end up? Do we know the answer to that question?
We do, and we are winding down, Jonah. We're going to keep people on the hook. We're going to go into some of the details this evening after, but I will say this. We do know that ultimately his personal belongings made their way back to Jerusalem, and one of the most exciting things that is among those things that made it back to Jerusalem, 2 columns, a single fragment And that is one of the pieces of the missing manuscript strips that no one's talking about. And we know where those were sent. So we're going to be talking about that. But look, Jono, listen, this story, this is a story filled with mysteries, plural. Why was Shapira in the Netherlands? I think we've solved that. Not only was there a great international conference and expo, but there was a Semitic conference there for all the top scholars in the world, and Shapira was there. He left mysteriously in October. Not so much of a mystery because the thing was over. He goes to Blumenthal, ultimately to Rotterdam. We've speculated he may have been in Rotterdam to plan a trip to another place, maybe America. Who knows? We're going to continue to dig on that. But we do know that even mystery surrounds his death. One thing to wrap this up. The whole affair, from the time he went to Germany until he was found dead in a hotel room in Rotterdam, took place in about 1 calendar year. Now get this, Jono. He died roughly at the time where Torah reading Ki Tisa was the weekly reading according to the annual Jewish cycle. Ki Tisa talks about a second set of commandments. Interestingly enough, Moses Wilhelm Shapira brought before the world and was rejected with a second set, a different set of the 10 words. Now, I will add that also at the same month in Adar is when traditionally Moses, the biblical Moses, was died. And then the last thing I'll say is that Moses Shapira was placed in a grave that was unknown, just like Moses, the biblical Moses. And Jono, I want you to come with me. We're going to talk to the Yakad about some more of these mysteries, and we'll catch them.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, let's do it.
I was just about to say that. We're going to go and do that now. You can join the Yakad, by the way. Just click join at the bottom and follow the links there. But that's exactly what we're going to go and talk about, because why is someone so known, so prevalent in the papers of the day, and then once he dies, these reports go out all around the world about his passing. Does he end up in an unmarked grave? We're going to talk about that with the Yakad straight after this. We'll be back this time next week to go further on this topic.
This is fun stuff, and it really gets fun in the weeks to follow, and we can't say yet what, but there is some big news coming, Jono. You and I even have to catch up. Latest, greatest coming out. We encourage everybody to join us. Hey, Jono, good to see you. See everybody next week. Thanks for joining us. Talk to you later.
See you soon.
All right.
Cheers.